Hi all. Here once again are the instructional strategies for contextualization we're discussing in this series. Activating background knowledge, teaching critical concepts, that's what we'll do today, establishing peer-to-peer interaction, and using exit cards for assessment. Here then is strategy number 2, teaching critical concepts. As you know, background knowledge is critical to understanding anything new, whether it's a video on infectious diseases, a graphic that shows the components of a drill platform, or a chapter on the basics of electricity. You also know that many of you students don't know a great deal about these topics and will easily feel frustrated, like me, frustrated and overwhelmed when confronted with technical text or a college lecture. This strategy, teaching critical concepts, can serve to fill the gap in your students' knowledge. As your students listen to you, they develop a cognitive database for new content knowledge, a database in their brain that they can go back to when they feel confused or overwhelmed by a topic. The concepts you teach them will act as an anchor that they can hook new information onto. The basic truth here is the following: the more you know, the more you know. When students see a prompt and generate ideas, like we did in strategy 1, and then hear you lecture on a topic, strategy 2, knowledge is layered and reinforced, and learning goes deeper than if we just skip over the treetops, anxious to move on to the next activity. Using this strategy, you actually teach. You present students with a few critical concepts related to technical area so they can feel smart and be competent and are ready to take in more. Here's another truth. We know that if we give students challenging tasks that they can complete, even when they need to struggle a bit, they want to do more hard stuff. If we give them tasks that are too easy, they get bored. If tasks are too hard, they become frustrated and just give up. By creating your own mini lecture, you can gauge what your students can handle, adjust the language you use, add an explanation here and there, and repeat where necessary. This allows you to push your students' thinking just a bit forward without having their brains shut down or get too tired. What does teaching critical concepts look like? Let's assume that you have a class of students who are interested in allied health. You have used a blood pressure gauge as your prompt and discussed some of the key vocabulary with them. So now it's time to teach some of the essential knowledge your students should possess if they want to transition, or just know something that others don't. In your mini lecture, you want to chunk important information into digestible bites without having to struggle too hard. A bit of challenge is good for your students. Let's take hypertension as a topic, for example. A concept that appears in pretty much all allied health courses. You might say something like this: every year, thousands of people fall seriously ill or even die because of high blood pressure, also called hypertension. Some die of cardiac arrest, that's a heart attack. Others suffer a stroke in the brain, while still others experience renal failure. That means their kidneys stop working. To avoid such a fate, it's important to monitor blood pressure to make sure it does not become elevated. Blood pressure can be taken at home or in a clinic or a pharmacy with a blood pressure gauge. You remember that one? An instrument that measures, well, blood pressure. If someone suffers from hypertension, they should be advised that elevated blood pressure can be brought down through medication, lifestyle changes, or diet such as limiting your sodium intake. You may want to repeat your mini lecture and ask students to write down the medical vocabulary they hear. And later on, you can print up the passage and discuss the language used with your students. You probably noticed that I use definitions, passive voice, and explanations of key terms within the text, all fairly common in CNA textbooks, for example. You want to follow your lecture with a quick comprehension check. You can do a true-false quiz or ask students to match the technical words you used in your lecture with their everyday equivalent. To sum things up, many of the authentic texts that students will have to learn to manage are way too challenging for basic skills students, particularly in the beginning. By teaching your students some critical concepts in a form that they can understand, you simply give knowledge away. Through the process of listening to you, present meaningful content, students get familiar with academic technical language without too much pain on their part. Though a bit of struggle is okay. But why bother, you may want to ask. Why not copy a few pages from a website or a textbook and have students read it? Why, pray tell, is it important for a teacher to create their own mini lecture for students to listen to? Especially since it is not all that simple to do when you've never done it before, Ida. All right, let's talk about it. Let's do a think, pair, share. Take a minute to think about what the advantages might be of creating a mini lecture yourself. Just a few sentences. Why is it important to increase the background knowledge of your students by being an active teacher in the process? I look forward to your answers, and you're now ready to move on and give students a few learning tasks to dig into.